But with that being said, we'll be moving on to the next segment. We're going to switch gears here to the world of MMA inside the UFC world. And in this segment, I'll be sharing my fight summary between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. So this took place in the co-main event of UFC 309 with Charles Oliveira defeating Michael Chandler by unanimous decision in the co-main event of UFC 309. Now, this was a pretty good performance by Charles Oliveira. He dominated Michael Chandler for 4 out of 5 rounds. The 5th round was, of course, Michael Chandler's best round of the entire fight. But for 4 out of 5 rounds, Charles Oliveira looked very dominant, controlling the pace of the fight, landing takedowns. He was in control on the ground in the wrestling department. He outbeat Michael Chandler in the wrestling department, landed the cleaner strikes. Charles Oliveira basically used his jiu-jitsu background and his power to win this fight against Michael Chandler. Now, I will say, I give Michael Chandler a lot of credit for that 5th round, because the 5th round was obviously his best round. He was landing some power shots that was rocking Charles Oliveira. He got the knockdown, and was trying to get him out of there in a effort to still win the fight in the 5th round. And I gotta say, he was pretty entertaining by picking up Charles Oliveira up on his back, and of course took him down to the ground, but then did it again one more time before the round ended. So I gotta say, that was a pretty exciting round in the 5th round between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler last night. But yeah, Charles Oliveira, I gotta say, his performance, he looks like he's back to being dominant. I know he lost in the beginning part of 2024 in the UFC 300 card to Arman Sarukin in a very close fight on that card. But I gotta say, this version of Charles Oliveira that we saw last night, that dominated Michael Chandler, he looks like he's back to being one of the greatest lightweight fighters in the UFC. Like he went anywhere, but in terms of what he's been through since May 7th of 2022, when he was stripped of the lightweight title for missing weight, he's gone through some ups and some downs since then. But man, this has to be a big highlight and a big sigh of relief to Charles Oliveira, knowing that he has something special coming very soon in the UFC. I'll get to that in a few moments, but I gotta say, Charles Oliveira deserves his flowers. He is one of the greatest lightweight fighters in UFC history. He's got a really good resume. I mean, he's got 35 MMA victories. He's got the most finishes in UFC history. Former lightweight champion. His resume, he's got a lot of big wins against Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler now twice, Dustin Poirier, Ben Darwish, Justin Gaethje. I mean, his resume is pretty top-notch. I gotta say, Charles Oliveira has a lot to be proud of. He's definitely gonna have a spot in the UFC Hall of Fame one day when his career is all said and done. But what's next for Charles Oliveira? Now this win, like I was just touching up on a few moments ago, this win in the co-main event of UFC 309 against Michael Chandler, he had a really good performance. Dominated 4 out of 5 rounds. And this was a title eliminator fight. So based off of that performance, I think Dana White's got to give Charles Oliveira his title shot against Islam Makhachev. We were supposed to see this rematch all the way back at UFC 294 last year, but it never happened because Charles Oliveira had to pull out of the fight. And even though Charles Oliveira, see, this is where the difficult part comes in, because there's an argument that Arman Sarukin should be next, and he will be reinstated off a suspension very soon. He did beat Charles Oliveira, and technically he should be next in line for a title opportunity. So Dana White and the rest of the UFC executives got to make a decision. But if it were up to me, based off of that performance, I would give the title shot to Charles Oliveira next. I think that's the biggest fight to be made at lightweight, that rematch between Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira for the lightweight title in the beginning part of 2025 at a UFC event. I think that's the big money fight, and I think Arman Sarukin's just got to be a little bit more patient, maybe take on another top contender at lightweight for the time being. But man, the lightweight division, I think that's going to be one of the best divisions in 2025, because there's so many talented fighters like Islam Makhachev, Max Holloway that will be coming up there, Charles Oliveira. I mean, Dustin Poirier, or he's about to retire. Forgot about that. But there's still a lot of talent at the lightweight division that the UFC has to offer. So I think that would be one of the most important divisions to follow for 2025. Now, what's next for Michael Chandler? Michael Chandler is going to take a dip in the lightweight rankings after this loss against Charles Oliveira. Like I keep saying, he lost 4 out of 5 rounds. he failed to gamble on himself in this fight against Charles Oliveira. Had he won, he could have played with fire, go after Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title, or still entertain that money fight against Conor McGregor in 2025. So even though he lost, he still has plenty of options. I mean, he was very he was very excited for what's next in the future after that loss. And Michael Chandler did call out some guys like Max Holloway, who's coming up the lightweight. He could fight him for the BMF title possibly, or he still wants that big money fight against Conor McGregor, something that he's wanted for 2 years. So there's plenty of options for Michael Chandler in 2025. He's still a big name at lightweight. He's still a big draw. And I think he's going to be very active in 2025 with some big fights, whether that's Max Holloway, Conor McGregor. There's plenty of options for him in 2025. So that is my Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler fight summary.